All right. Hello, students and teachers. Welcome to our very first Career Exploration live panel for military careers. I am Lauren Kunze. I'm the Director of Program Strategy and Partnerships for Junior Achievement of Southern Colorado. And I am so excited to introduce you all to our panelists today. We are going to introduce all of our panelists and then ask them some pre-recorded, some predetermined questions that that we have laid out for the panelists, and then we are going to take some Q&A from you all. So if you are watching this live, please tell us what school you are from in the chat. So that we can greet you. And if you have students who have questions for our panelists that they already know of, or if they think of questions during the course of our panel, they can also put those in the chat and we'll make sure to get those answered here live. So we are going to introduce our panelists right now. Today with us, we have Colonel Miller. Colonel Miller, can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your career?
Thanks, Lauren. So my career through the Air Force, I was an Air Force fighter pilot, flew F-15s for a little over 20 years, and then did some staff assignments, retiring after almost 29 years of service. I'm still in uniform today because I teach high school Air Force Junior ROTC, which today is a uniform day. So our students and myself and my ASI are both in uniform today. As an Air Force fighter pilot, a couple of questions you asked was how do we get here? Obviously college. Any officer has to go to college, graduate from college. Through that, you kind of compete. I went through Air Force ROTC, and you compete at that level to try to get a slot to go to pilot training, which I did. As soon as you graduate, you get commissioned as a second lieutenant. You go off to pilot training for 52 short weeks. At the end of pilot training, you kind of get rank ordered with your classmates, and depending on where you finish, depends on kind of what airplane you fly. I finished high enough up, I got to choose my airplane and my base. So my first assignment was to Eglin Air Force Base in Fort Walton Beach, Florida, flying the mighty F-15C Eagle. I was blessed to stay in the F-15 my entire career, about 21 years of flying, multiple assignments. I did 2 combat assignments flying the F-15. I was what we call a schoolhouse IP instructor pilot, teaching others how to fly the F-15. I was on the staff where I did evaluations flying the F-15. So lots of different assignments to do that. How do you prepare for flying? It helps if I had a private pilot's license from high school. I was fortunate enough to get some scholarships through the Civil Air Patrol and got my pilot's license. So that I think helped me in pilot training to get what I wanted to fly. But there are no requirements. Students at the Air Force Academy, ROTC, and OTS all go to pilot training. Some have 0 flying experience, and some, like me, have a pilot's license or even a commercial license, like one of my classmates had, who had been flying commercially. So really no required effort to go to pilot training. It's just kind of how you score on the aptitude tests and those things to go. My industry is hiring like crazy. Now, obviously the military side of it, you do the military. But afterwards, I've got many of my comrades that I flew with that fly for the airlines. That industry is really hot. There is a worldwide shortage of pilots. As a matter of fact, if you want to come to JROTC, JROTC offers a high school student a $25,000 private pilot scholarship to about 20 different universities that they go to in the summer, where they can also earn up to 12 credit hours at that university, all paid for by the Air Force. That's how short the pilot field is right now. COVID, obviously for the military side, COVID really hasn't affected it. In In my second career as a high school JROTC, it has affected it hugely, obviously in and out of virtual, live. We're full on in-person learning right now, so that's awesome, but it clearly has impacted the high school world, and I'm sure the students know that as well. But as far as the airlines, they have furloughed some folks, but now they're bringing them back because air travel is picking up huge. And I'll leave it at that for now.
Awesome. Thank you, Colonel Miller. Thank you for sharing that. And so exciting for our students who think they might want to be pilots. So now I'm going to introduce our next panelist, and it is Chief Master Sergeant Dawn Wilson. Dawn, take it away.
Hi, I'm Chief Wilson. I'm an Air Force reservist, which means that during the week, I work at the Missile Defense Agency in Colorado. And then on reserve weekends, I manage the space operator career field. So we make sure that they have enough people in each unit and they get the training that they need. So I've been an Air Force reservist for 15 years now. And then before that, I was active duty Air Force for 4 years. So during my time, I've always been in the space operations career field. So I've done everything from flying satellites, help launching satellites, bringing satellites back in, using radars to track satellites. So my whole career field's been space operations. And for me, when I first joined the Air Force, I wanted to be a dentist. And I just didn't have the money to pay for all those years of college. So I was hoping that the Air Force would help me achieve that goal. And over time, I realized that dentistry is not where I wanted to be. And space ops was really cool. And so I think just from that point of view, I tested. So that's how I got into this career field is I took a test before joining the Air Force. And then they kind of place you from there based on how well you do in each category. So when they offered me this job, I thought it sounded a little crazy because I didn't have the confidence. I didn't think I had the smarts to be able to do it, but it really turned out to be so exciting. And now here I am, over 20 years later, and I'm doing it on the contractor side with Boeing, as well as the military side with the Air Force still. And yes, there is talk about us possibly moving over to the Space Force. I know that's pretty big right now, but for us being in the reserves, it's not quite on the front lines for me just right now. So I used the Air Force. I did my 4 years active duty. And then once I got out is when I used the Air Force to pay for my bachelor's degree. And I actually did that in computer information systems. So not even medical. And then from there, I was able to get a job with L3 Communications, still in the satellite world, still in the space field. And they actually paid for my master's degree. So I just owed them time with the company afterwards. So that was definitely a benefit. And I would say like one of the biggest things when it comes to deciding on your career field, and this career field specifically, is just have an open mind and be ready to learn. So like I was saying, I had no idea that I was smart enough or confident enough to be where I am today. So it just always surprises me that 20 years ago, I didn't picture myself being where I am right now. And another thing, what I see differently now from when I started this 20 years ago is we're just expecting more and more of younger people. So when I first came in my first unit, it was definitely the more educated and more experienced people that were getting to do all the cool stuff. And now over the last 20 years, I've definitely seen that come down. And I think that has to do with there's a lot more people who are coming in with a bachelor's degree, whether they're on the officer side or the enlisted side, which wasn't the case 20 years ago. And now you're just seeing it so much more often. So a lot of the younger people are getting more and more opportunities. So just pay attention and do well in school because you just never know where you're going to end up. And then as far as how COVID has affected my career field, I think it's allowed us to more successfully work from home. So we've been given all the tools that we need. Limited. I can do anything unclassified from home now. We've changed the structure of our meetings, and it's just so much more accommodating. Now, everything that I have to do on the classified side, obviously, I still need to go into the office to do that. But it's definitely given us a little bit of an advantage.
All right, thank you so much for sharing that with us. So now we are going to go on to our last panelist, and that is Dr. Antoinette Burns with the Children's Hospital now, but she'll tell you more about her military career. Go ahead, Antoinette.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Antoinette Burns, and I am actually retired from the Air Force, like Colonel Miller, but I don't put my uniform on anymore. So I started my Air Force career out of high school with an ROTC scholarship to get an undergraduate degree. My parents wanted all of us to go to college, but it wasn't something they could pay for. So the military gave us an opportunity to be able to get that college education. And I actually started out as a civil engineer. And I did that for 5 years before I realized that it wasn't what I wanted to do forever. And so I rethought about everything and decided I wanted to go to medical school. And I actually separated. I left the Air Force after 5 years, and then I applied for a scholarship to go to medical school and received a scholarship. So the Air Force then paid for another 4 years of education for me to get a degree as a doctor. And then after that, I spent 3 years in training to be a pediatrician. And the Air Force paid for me to be able to get that training as well. And then I was able to spend the next 10, 12 years or so traveling around the world as a pediatrician in the Air Force. And I've been to South Korea and Germany, Florida and Texas and Ohio. And it's been really rewarding. A lot of people ask me, how come you need a doctor to take care of children in the military? And one of the biggest reasons is because we need active duty parents to feel comfortable that their children are being taken care of wherever they get assigned and wherever they may go if their children are behind with some of the rest of the family. So it is a really important job. Sometimes, again, it does seem a little bit strange to have a pediatrician in the Air Force, but it was a great career. I already mentioned that the Air Force paid for 4 years of undergraduate degree college before I went to medical school. That's another 4 years. And then depending on what type of medicine you want to do, it will determine how much training you do after medical school. And the Air Force trains physicians in almost every medical specialty that you can think of. So we have surgeons, and we ear, nose, and throat doctors, and dermatologists, and obviously pediatricians, family doctors, a wide range. And so depending on what type of medicine you want to go into, that will determine how much training after medical school you would need. So mine was 3 years. And then I did some of my active duty time paying back my commitment. That was why they paid for my school, was because I was going to serve. And at some point I decided that I wanted to go to school because I love it so much. So I decided to get a master's degree in public health. And once again, the Air Force paid for that for me too. And that was an additional 2 years of schooling. And it's been great. I've had a really wonderful time, met lots of really great people, get to do things that are a little bit different. I haven't deployed or gone overseas as a doctor into a war zone or a humanitarian type of relief area, but there are lots of pediatricians who have done that and other physicians that get to do that as well, to be able to help people out in their time of need. The biggest changes, I think, right now for us in medicine in general is the switch to trying to do virtual medical care. And that's something that was just in the very beginning stages before COVID. And then when COVID hit, suddenly we had to very quickly adapt to that. And so now I'm retired. I work at a children's hospital here in Colorado Springs, and we're able to see our patients both in person and virtually, and back and forth all in the same day, which is really remarkable to be able to provide that care. Whereas it used to be that if you were sick or something happened at home and you couldn't make it to your doctor's appointment, you had to cancel. Now we can just convert that appointment and be able to take care of our patients when they're still at home as well. So that's been really, really wonderful. And overall, it's been great. It's nice to have had a position that I could transfer directly to a job outside of the military. That's been really exciting for me and really beneficial. Sometimes it can be a little bit difficult, but what's great about the military is that there's a whole group of people that will help you when you get ready to transition a military career to a civilian career. And they will help you to figure out what type of job qualified for. So if you want to do something super cool that might not be available as a civilian, you can still do that and then have the opportunity to transfer some of those skills and find out where you might fit in the civilian world.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Dr. Burns. So what are some best practices that you haven't already mentioned in your introductions that students in middle school and high school can think about for preparing for a career in your industry? And maybe it's something that you wish you had done differently, or something that you did that you felt like, oh, that was really worthwhile. I'm so glad I did it that way. We'll start with Colonel Miller. Anything you want to share with our students?
Sure. Some of the things you can do to prepare: STEM classes. So the Air Force likes its pilots to focus on STEM, to do those things. Here in Colorado Springs, there is an aviation foundation for high school students. They will teach you ground school at no cost. All the way up through your FAA private exam. My son did that. He's actually in college right now, working towards an aviation degree from that time that he spent here in Colorado Springs at the Aviation Education Foundation for Colorado Springs. So look that up. They're online. They're very interested in your grades. They will interview you, a 3-on-1 panel. To do those things, but focus on STEM, focus on just get involved in aviation. Come over to JROTC and we'll teach you some of that too.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Dawn, what do you think? Anything else you would like to add?
Well, actually, I just wanted to piggyback on Colonel Miller because I did not do ROTC through my high school. That was not available. But boy, I wish I had. It would have made basic training so much easier. It would have made, it would have opened up so many more doors for me because there's career fields that I had never heard of, that I didn't even know about, I didn't know existed. So, I mean, I'm not saying it's for everybody, but it's definitely something to just check out and look into and see, see what the other options are that are out there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dawn. Chief Wilson. And Dr. Burns, anything you wanted to add to that?
I just want to add, yes, I agree, definitely get good grades. There's no problem that ever comes from getting a good grade. That's what I tell my patients in clinic. But then the other thing is don't be afraid to change your mind. So I spent 5 years as a civil engineer and I found that something that I liked better, and that's okay. I think we put a lot of pressure on younger persons today to have an absolute idea of what they want to be when they grow up, when you still haven't even finished high school. And I would just encourage you to try different things and know that you can change your mind and it's going to be okay.
Can I piggyback on that?
You sure can.
And I tell my students this all the time. So when I was a junior in high school, I went to a vocational technical school for half my day learning to be an airframe and power plant mechanic. So I'd go weld, sandblast, rivet, and it wasn't until between my junior and senior year that somebody convinced me that through grants and eventually an Air Force scholarship, I could go to college because we had no money to go to college. Just like Dr. Burns talked about, there's ways to do that out there. And so then I spent my senior year trying to get the requirements to get into college done to do that. And then when I was in college, I changed my major 3 times. So never say never. The goal was to come out and go to pilot training for me. And there's, like Dr. Burns said, there's plenty of ways to go about doing that. And never say never. You may change your mind your senior year like I did.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for sharing that. So now we're going to go to a couple of student questions that were asked to our panelists. So this one is from Stephen from Doherty High School, and he wants to know, should we go to college prior to joining the military? I know we've talked a little bit about this, but does anyone have anything to add about the benefits of going to college prior to the military, or maybe as some of you have done after the military? Looks like Dr. Burns is going to take this one.
I can say that if you join the military before, then you have the opportunity of them paying for your college. And I think there are definitely benefits to that, obviously financially, but then also it gives you additional time to figure out what it is that you want to study in college. And then oftentimes I find that you're a better student, you're more engaged in what you're learning. So I think that's a benefit.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And the next question is from our chat here live on YouTube. And the question, I think, is for either Colonel Miller or Chief Wilson. And the student is asking, what are the eyesight requirements? And I'm assuming this question refers to the Air Force. So what can you tell us about that? Is that part of your exam? What is that part of a health exam? How does that work?
So eyesight requirements, basically your vision has to be correctable just to come into the military. I actually had a high school friend that had some vision issues and was not eligible to come into the military. I've got some kids that I worked in other youth programs that ended up coming into the Air Force with not very superb vision. Ended up getting a waiver to go fly. So it just needs to be correctable so that you can see 20/20 through vision correction or whatever. And that's just to come into the military itself. Pilots, there's vision requirements, but those are waiverable if the Air Force really wants to keep you around.
Oh, I did not know that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And that question was from Cash in Woodland Park. So thank you, Cash, for sharing.
I have one thing I can just add on to that. Now, if you have vision surgery, so eye surgery to correct your vision, you can still qualify to be.
Oh, that is wonderful to know. All right. And another question is from Samantha from Doherty. And this might start a little bit of a conversation. How do we know which branch to choose? So how do we know which branch of the military to choose? And we have 2 Air Force and 1 Army, and we're going to have a gentleman from the Navy as well. So I think he'd have something to say about this too. But what would you like to share? And feel free to unmute yourselves. Anybody can answer this question.
Well, I'll start off. Obviously, through JROTC, the goal of Air Force JROTC is not recruiting, but as a byproduct, we do have a few of our students that go into the military. That's not something we push. It's not something that we strive for, but we're an avenue to help them if that's what they want to do. And I've got students in the Navy, the Marines, the Air Force, the Army. I don't think we've had any Coast Guard students yet. So truly it depends on what their desires are for the military. I don't know. Each military branch has different opportunities. If you're looking for ground combat, something like that, the Marines or the Army is your choice. If you really love the water, the Navy is probably your choice. If you like to spend time on boats or ships, to do that. If you like And I always joke, if you like hotel rooms, the Air Force is probably your choice. So it truly is a student's personal desires for what they're looking for their military branch. I tend to think the Air Force is more corporate military. But that is a personal choice. I'll let the other two chime in.
All right, so for me, I didn't have too many military members in my family, so there was no pressure there. There was no my dad telling me, one branch was better than the other. So I didn't have any of that. I had a friend who joined the Air Force, and I said, that sounds great, let's do it together. So it didn't work out that way, but we did both end up joining the Air Force. But like in my neighborhood enough, we have, I live in between a retired Army guy, and then I have a Navy guy on the other side of me. So, so we joke around a little bit about which service, which branch is better. And then my brother is Coast Guard. One thing I did learn is you can switch services. So I came in Air Force, but when I was going through a commissioning program, it was through the Navy. So I could have gone from Sergeant Wilson to Ensign Wilson over on the other side. So if you decide that you didn't choose correctly, you still have an out. You got an option to switch over if you'd like.
All right, Dr. Burns, anything to add?
No, I agree. I started out in the Army and had some friends in college who were in the Air Force, and I switched. So you can definitely switch. Who is still active duty. She's a reserve in the Army, and I had a sister in the Coast Guard and a brother in the Air Force. So lots of different rivalries that are fun. But everyone does a great job, and I don't think you can go wrong. And again, you can change your mind.
All right, so you can't go wrong, and you can totally change your mind too. It's so good for our students to know. I think we have time for one more question, so we'll take another one from the chat. This one is from Eugene, and I think it is for Colonel Miller. It's, how do you get a Rozzy Scholarship?
Okay, perfect. So there is a high school scholarship program for ROTC. It does help if you are in JROTC. As a matter of fact, if you spend 3 years in JROTC, you can get a full year of your college ROTC waived. Although I do recommend that students take ROTC anyway, because you're building your friendships and those things through that program. But through the high school scholarship program, you apply. There's some GPA targets, about a 3.6-ish GPA is what you're shooting for. Your SAT, you're shooting for 1240 to qualify. And then you go on to their website, which we help coach. So you can Google Air Force ROTC, and guess what? It'll pop up. It'll show you there's 3 boards usually throughout the year. One starting very early in the school year, the final in January. And then if you make it to the next round, you go up to a Air Force ROTC detachment and you interview with the detachment commander, who then makes the recommendation to the Air Force. Surprisingly, if you meet those basic requirements, there is a pretty high percentile chance to pick up a scholarship. And there's 3 different types. One, the top type, you could go to Duke University on a full ride for 300 grand, all the way down to obviously state schools, which I am a state school graduate, so I'm not going to knock that at all, with full ride scholarships. And that includes a stipend every month with some cash in your pocket for pizza money, as well as books and tuition.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that with our students. Well, that is all the time that we have for today. I wish we had more, but unfortunately we don't. So thank you for Colonel Miller. Thank you, Master Sergeant Dawn Wilson, thank you. Dr. Antoinette Burns, for your time, for sharing with us today. Thank you, teachers and students, for joining us today for our military careers panel. If you have other burning questions that you would like to have answered, you can send them to Junior Achievement and we will do our best to get those answered for you. But have a great day and thank you all for joining us, and we will see you soon.